vicino a me di trovarsi qui insieme a Mark Lanegan, soprattutto Paolo perché è un grande amante di Cobain, oppure se è stato ucciso dai media, dalla stampa. Vorrei chiedere a lui chi o che cosa ha ucciso la musica grunge. Who or what killed the grunge movement, the grunge experience? What happened? Why did it suddenly finish? Who or what killed the grunge movement, the grunge experience? What happened? Who or what killed the grunge movement, the grunge experience? What happened? Why did it suddenly finish?
That's really hard for me
È difficile spiegare.
to comment on because I myself have never liked being any part of a movement or a scene or a club or a clique.
A lui per primo non piace essere parte di un movimento o di una scena.
I tend to be a loner.
Cerca di essere un solitario.
So when you wake up in the morning, I may not be there.
Quindi quando io mi sveglio la mattina, quando noi ci svegliamo la mattina, lui potrebbe non esserci più. Ma sembra quasi una cosa triste da dire. It sounds like a sad thing to say. Don't you think?
I thought I was happy.
Oh, io pensavo fosse felice per lui da tempo collabora con i Queens of the Stone Age, soprattutto con Josh Homme, che è il cantante e chitarrista dei Queens of the Stone Age.
Mark Lanegan, a member of Screaming Trees and a close friend of Cobain's, says he didn't hear from Cobain that last week. Kurt hadn't called me, he says. He hadn't called some other people. He hadn't called his family. He hadn't called anybody. Lanegan says he had been looking for Kurt for about a week before he was found. I had a feeling that something real bad had happened. Rolling Stone, June 2nd, 1994. Mark Lanegan's account of his interactions with Kurt Cobain changed significantly over time. In 1994, he publicly suggested that he hadn't heard from Kurt before his death. But in his 2020 memoir, Sing Backwards and Weep, he admits Kurt did call him and he chose not to answer. That's a major factual shift in the narrative about their last contact. And it raises questions worthy of a proper review, including by the Seattle Police Department, about why the earlier public statement does not match Mark Lanegan's statement from 2020.
One day in early April of '94, I was lying on my tattered, cigarette-burned sofa, chain-smoking and watching stupid soap operas on TV with the sound off, when my phone rang. As was my normal routine, I let the answering machine pick it up and waited to see if whoever called would leave a message. "Hey man, it's Kurt. I'm back in town. What are you doing? Come on over and listen to records with me." I thought about it for a minute. Though I loved Kurt, I knew I wasn't calling back today. A, I had quite a bit of cash at the moment and plenty of dope, so the thought of possibly running out to score for him was a drag. And B, I assumed Courtney would be there. I'd become conditioned to steer clear of their house because every time I'd been there in recent months, some kind of drama would erupt between the two of them. It unfolded like some dreary sitcom joke. Courtney would be uncomfortably friendly to me in front of Kurt till she finally triggered an outburst from him. So I blew Kurt off because I didn't feel like playing the pawn in a fucked up chess game that particular day. He called twice more over the next couple hours. Despite the gnawing feeling that I was the world's shittiest friend, I never picked up. Just continued to lie around the place in dirty boxers and the stained robe a stripper girlfriend had left in my bedroom, imagining myself a modern-day Oscar Wilde, listening to a Stranglers record and staring mindlessly at the silent TV screen. I was oblivious to the gathering storm headed in my direction. Late in the afternoon, I got a call from the entertainment lawyer I shared with Kurt, Rosemary Carroll, an extremely smart, no-nonsense woman who happened to be the ex-wife of celebrated writer-musician Jim Carroll. "Mark, if you know where Kurt is, you need to tell me now." A couple minutes later, another message. "If he is at your apartment and you're not telling me, we're going to have a problem." I called her back to assure her I wasn't hiding him. "Mark," she said, "I don't think you realize what's going on. He checked himself out of rehab yesterday, flew back to Seattle today, and now nobody can get in touch with him. He's probably fine, Rosemary. Don't worry. I'm sure he'll check in soon. In fact, I had not known what was going on. A highly publicized overdose earlier had been posed to both Dylan Carlson and me as accidental. I had also not known he'd left rehab and come home on the same day he called me. I called Kurt. No answer. I called our mutual friends, but no one had heard from him. I began to wonder if something was really wrong. I chastised myself for not answering the phone earlier, but I told myself, how could I know? How could I know what was really going on? How could I have known Courtney wasn't even there? How? The next day, someone in the Nirvana camp asked if I would go with Dylan to some Capitol Hill dope houses to see if Kurt was hanging out in any of them. A private investigator Courtney had hired named Tom Grant picked us up. With money he supplied, we went from place to place, buying drugs and looking for Kurt to no avail. He couldn't be found. After we had gone to the spot of every last dealer we could think of, Grant drove us to Kurt's house near Lake Washington. We went from room to room calling his name, but there was no answer. I went outside to smoke a cigarette and stood at the bottom of a flight of stairs that led to a small room above his garage. For a moment, I thought about going up and taking a look. Just then, Dylan and Grant walked out, ready to leave. I knocked the cherry off my half-finished smoke and put the rest in my coat pocket. For a brief second, I had a terrible premonition, but I shook it off and got in the car, eager to just get home and do my share of the heroin we had bought. A day or two later, Rosemary called me, her voice shaking with emotion, and delivered the news. Kurt's body had been found in the small room above his garage, the same room at which I had stood at the foot of earlier. A medical examiner judged his death to have taken place the same day we were at the house looking for him. I hung up the phone and burst into tears of remorse, self-hatred, and mountainous grief. I knew I would never get over his death. It would shadow me until the day I died. The next few days went by in a blur. Everett True, a British journalist I'd drunkenly knocked off his bar stool at the Reading Festival in '92, came to Seattle and stayed with me at Courtney's request the week before Kurt's memorial. The incident at Reading had marked the only time Kurt had been openly angry with me. He had looked at me with silent fury and disappointment and quietly said, "You shithead." John Hicks was staying in my apartment at this time. Hicks had always been a reliable and loyal friend. He had traveled the world with me, my most trusted sidekick who was willing to do my dirty work when I was unable or unwilling to do it myself. Late one night, I got a phone call from Kurt. He was obviously so fucked up I couldn't understand 3/4 of what he was saying, and it scared me. The only thing I really understood was that he wanted me to come over, and to come over right away. Since he clearly was not in need of drugs, my mind went haywire with worry. What the fuck was going on? Hicks and I hopped in a cab and took the 15-minute ride to Kurt's lakefront estate. After we walked up to the door and knocked without any response, I cased the perimeter of the place until I came to a window with no blinds. The scene inside the brightly lit room sent a jolt of adrenaline rocketing to my brain. Lying flat on the floor, face down, was Kurt. He looked like he might be dead. "Hicks," I yelled, "find a way into the house." He began quickly checking every door and window, searching for an unlocked entryway inside. I began banging hard and loudly on the huge, thick, 6-foot-high window and screaming Kurt's name to no response. I began to freak out. The thought crossed my mind to go to a neighbor's house to call an ambulance, something I knew I couldn't do unless absolutely necessary, due to the massive wave of unwanted negative publicity that would bring down on him. But then I thought I saw his hand move slightly. I began banging and yelling twice as hard. John whipped around the corner, covered in sweat and out of breath. "I'm sorry, boss, I can't find a way in." "Check it out," I said. "He's moving in there, he's not dead." After more banging and yelling, we watched as, with supreme effort that looked like it took every last ounce of physical power he had, Kurt managed to flip over onto his back. Fuck, no. I immediately envisioned Kurt's dead body strangled to death on his own vomit. "Go get a big rock or a brick." If he started to puke, I was going to have to break a window and get inside. Hicks returned in a minute with a boulder I couldn't believe he was able to carry. With the rush of adrenaline coursing through his veins, he seemed to be finding strength I couldn't imagine he'd ever accessed before. But after an hour or so of us yelling, banging, knocking, and screaming his name, Kurt slowly began to come to life. We urged him on as he tried to stand, yet fell painfully back to the floor over and over again. At one point, he got to his feet, and with his eyes completely closed, managed to take a couple of steps towards the door before his ankle turned in a way that looked so fucked, I was sure he must have broken it. At the end of nearly 2 full hours, he was still crawling his way towards the door, inch by agonizing inch. Finally, with much loud verbal encouragement from the two of us in the yard, he managed to unlock it. As we burst through, I picked him up and quickly carried him to the couch, while John grabbed a towel and a cooking pot full of water and ice cubes from the huge kitchen. He soaked the towel in it and held it against the back of Kurt's neck. We spent the night keeping an eye on him, checking his breathing and making sure he was warm and kept under blankets. The next morning, he said all he could remember was that he'd done a shot of heroin, nothing out of the ordinary, had not taken any pills, drunk any alcohol, or anything else out of character for him. It had been a stressful, exhausting night for Hicks and me, but for Kurt it looked to be something much more dangerous. Once again, I felt the heat of guilt as I was acutely aware of my willful participation in his close-to-the-edge addiction. I'd been blessed with a large frame and hardy constitution. He wasn't physically built like me, with a much slighter body, and was often ill with some unknown stomach ailments, making it torture for him to eat anything. I was at heart just a sick fucking enabler. No, actually something much worse. A parasite who had lived off the misery of this guy I had loved for so long by being a conduit through which he received his death doses. An actively negative presence in the life of this beautiful and talented man who, instead of showing him any positive guidance, consistently chose to take the low road so that I could continue to stay high. One